where you transitioned. Walking while trans. I never heard of that. What is that?
Well, basically, when I looked it up, it's kind of when a woman who also happens to be transgender is walking down the road. She, a transgender woman, mostly women of color, however, can happen to any transgender woman, not just women of color, but it's more predominantly against women of color, where you can be profiled as being a sex worker. Yeah, so
what do you think they're looking for when they define a trans woman within a trans woman sex worker? What do you think makes it walking while trans that makes them a target?
Well, one thing that I'm reading here is called decriminalizing at the very least. Prostitution is central to transgender rights, and one of the ways in which they kind of want to reform this is to get like the officer's perception of the individual they're profiling, because then you can get what they're actually trying to do, which is like, oh, it's a man in a dress and a wig and he's trying to get money from men in exchange for sexual favors, and they write that down on the report, and then you expose the bigotry of the police station and what they're trying to do. So I think what's going on is they're looking for a stereotype, which is one of the reasons I've been considering basically drowning my face in makeup and living as stealth as possible. Because if I can...
I had got a message because I had no idea what it was. Because again, for me, I always identified as female. So I didn't, once I transitioned, and that's something that I want to talk about, is like, once I transitioned, I just lived my life. I always worked, always had a job, and I didn't really have a lot of the obstacles, and I'm very blessed and thankful for that. But I lived stealth. One thing that I was told from my physician, Irene Sills. I started my transition very young. I was 17 and I was taking my mom's hormone pills. Back then we had AOL. So, and I just want to say really quick, shout out to Bright and Smile for giving my teeth the glow that I have. And I just wanted to throw them out because they were sponsoring. I didn't want to forget about them. But again, I was about 17. My mom had a full hysterectomy. And she had these hormone pills, and she was like, oh, I hate them. I can't stand them. I don't want to take them. They do this, this, and that. And my girlfriend at the then time on AOL was like, oh my God, that's what you need. You need hormone pills. You need to take your mom's hormone pills. So I started taking like 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. And then one day my mom said, my nickname was Booby. She was like, Booby, I think Dana's still on my hormone pills, which was her best friend. I said, you know what? I think she is too. And she would fill the bottle up. And then one day my mom, she had a second job. And she would get up very early in the morning. And one day I came out the bathroom and she was like, your skin just looks so good. And she didn't know why my skin was looking so good. And my uncle had seen me, we had a fire drill, and I guess my cousin was leaving early, and my uncle had seen me, because what I used to do is I used to dress women's clothes under my regular clothes, and in high school I would change, because I used to wear braids and things like that. And so we had a fire drill, and I'm outside in full girl, and my uncle was just like, come here. And I was like, oh my God. And he was like, what are you doing? And I was just like, having a fire drill. And he was
busted. You got busted.
Was he what?
Was he at least cool about it?
he was cool about it. He was just like, okay. And I was like, all
That's
right,
good.
well, bye. But my mom was just like, you might as well take those clothes off because that's not what you had on in school. And I had a supportive mom. So I'm very thankful and fortunate. So for me, you have to get to a place where you've transitioned. And I've transitioned. So I say that because once you do that, a lot of the obstacles you don't have. So walking while trans is foreign to me because I identify as female. And from what I had got from a message, because I was so curious about it and I didn't know anything about it, was that what they were looking for were Adam's apples and big feet. And I know Misty had asked what they were looking for, and that's what they were looking for. They were looking for Adam's apples and big feet. For the women who were walking in, they went in certain areas where those girls were working girls. So they had certain locations, according to what I was sent, where they would find those girls and they would look for Adam's apples and big feet. Misty, did I answer your question?
It definitely does, but just because you have a Adam's apple and big feet doesn't mean that you're out committing a crime. So
But
why
they
would
were
we
only going
particular
in certain
to-
targeted areas. I'm not sure if this took place generally, which I think I heard something about a trans woman who was in a park and she got arrested or something.
Oh,
But I thought from what the message had said, it was in certain areas where they do the working girls.
yeah.
And they were getting arrested, or is it just anywhere?
See, I didn't quite read that far into it because unfortunately the nature of the article did cause me a little bit of stress, so I had to take a break.
Now, what
But
do you mean by that when you said it caused you stress?
flashbacks and PTSD. Because one of the things that I wanted to talk about is sex work within the trans community.
But
A
don't
lot
you
of
think that sex
times,
work in this trans community reconfirms the negative stereotype that trans women are a bunch of sex workers? And if we want to be treated with respect as women and slinging sex work, and then it adds to it, it certainly doesn't detract from people thinking this stuff if we're all
no,
out there doing it.
Now,
unfortunately,
what do you
Bad about
define
it after,
sex
and
work?
then want to feel bad about it after you're traumatizing a little bit to yourself because you're adding to a negative stereotype, and then when it bites you in the butt, you're traumatized about it. But
yeah.
doing sex work, doesn't it have a connotation of the objectification that we hate?
Yeah, but what do you
does.
define
It
sex
adds
work?
to it. I think it
What
adds to it.
can I say something? What do you
Yeah.
define as sex work?
So basically, the idea of sex work, there's multiple, for example, the kind that I did for a while was actually more online, which is I actually had an OnlyFans, and it wasn't always consensual. In fact, I wouldn't really argue that it was something I fully voluntarily did. I did it during a moment of desperation. Because one of the things that I deal with is dysphoria over what I've got down there. And so I wanted to I needed some way to make money, and I did not have a job, and finding a job, at least, especially during COVID, is really, really difficult.
Very.
So desperate times called for desperate measures. I started objectifying myself with the intent to make money. The goal was after I got bottom surgery, I was going to quit and delete all my shit and then never go back. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because in the trans community, work is hard. It's very, very difficult to find a job. And so
Can I say something? And not to say that it isn't, but I don't know a lot about the gender expression. Please excuse me. And I want to learn more about it. I want to learn about all those identities. And I know that we have a person, Misty, who worked at a facility and she had some training in some of those identities, but I am still learning because I knew a person And I think they said their pronouns were them, they, theirs.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Them,
they
they,
were, huh?
them, they, their, basically. So
And
yeah.
and they were transgender non-conforming.
Um,
Um,
non-binary is where you aren't exclusively male or aren't exclusively female. So like me,
But isn't
I'm a
that
woman.
different? Because I always thought a transition was A to Z, like it's male to female or female to male. That's a transition from one thing to the opposite of what it was before. But this
Well,
is like kind of different because if someone's going from A to G or A to H or A to I, it's like from in the meeting in the middle of two, right? Is it the same thing, do you think?
um, I've from what I've done, looking up and researching about non-binary issues, basically the way
Yeah.
they fall under the trans umbrella is that being trans is not necessarily that you're transitioning from A to B or from B to A, but rather you do not identify as A, which is your birth sex, or you do not identify with B, which is your birth sex.
But how is that the same as
what
something
is
so
this? What
different?
would the sex be then?
So let's say A is male, B is female. So you don't identify as male, you don't identify as female, and of course your male, your sex is male or your sex is female. You don't identify with, like, let's say your sex is female, you don't identify with that sex, but you're not transitioning to male either. Um, if you aren't male or female, then you would be considered non-binary. And some people do not feel comfortable being listed as either male or female. So they consider themselves non-binary.
Well, I
Um,
think that's where the tricky part of identity gets. And I think sometimes that's why, we have so much problems and we have to protest and things like that. It gets very tricky because science is like fixed. It's one way, or excuse me, you can manipulate science, but you can't really change it. Kind of like how you have the law of gravity and how you have the law of the nature and the certain systems that revolve around that. You can manipulate it, of course, but you can't change it. And that's the thing about sex that gets confusing for someone like me, I guess I could say a veteran in the trans community, because for women like me, it was you were diagnosed. Now the trail was a lot different for girls like me. You had to go to therapy for a one whole year, and legally you couldn't transition until the therapist deemed you psychologically ready for that, because there's a lot of psychological things that go with transitioning, and you wouldn't transition if you psychologically weren't ready, couldn't take care of yourself, couldn't have employment. Those things, when I transitioned, would block you from transitioning. And then before that, you had to have been at least dressing like a girl for 3 to 6 months prior to coming to your appointment. And then while transitioning, without hormones, you saw a therapist. And it was hard for a lot of girls. That's why a lot of Black girls went to silicone and street hormones, because that part was hard. But I followed through the process, and I got grandfathered in because I had hormones in my system from taking them from my mom, but I still had to see a therapist. And I say that strongly because I don't think a lot of girls are doing that process. They're not going to that therapist, and they're not really getting classified to transition. So for me, it was male to female, and then there were female to males. So then the wave of the new gender identity was different. It's different to me because I didn't get to, I don't know much about it. And I'm so happy that you do, because I kind of feel like you have to pick a gender. Am I wrong for saying that? I feel like like you are not gender, a sex, because when it comes to surgery and things like that, like how does that all play in? Like how does that work if you're not male and you're not female?
Well,
do you remove it?
the easiest way to describe it is actually referencing a meme that I saw before, which is basically that the body is your vessel and it's up to you to design it how you want to design it.
So
And
will you be like
so
a Barbie and just have nothing there?
like that would be great. Like if I could just be like, nope, I don't have anything down there. I'm just void, you know. I'm null and void. I am above, but I am also below. I am two, but I am also four.
Do
I
you think
am
this is
nothing,
why
but I am.
Do you think this is why Trump wanted to maybe get rid of trans identity because of this new form of identity? Because I kind of feel like you got all these identities now. Like your ID will be so the choices, like when you go get a job, male, female, gender non-conforming, gender queer, gender. It's like how how does that play in reality? Like how does that really work?
Um, well, in terms of like transitioning from being a man to being let's say um agender, right? So let's say you're agender. Agender is a gender in the non-binary spectrum, and basically when you're agender, that is the lack of a gender identity. So that is completely neutral. You don't really have much of a gender identity. I think I recall hearing of some people who are agender getting rid of their genitals altogether, so they still have the ability to pee. So they still have the urethra, but they don't have the sex organ, if that makes
Why would
sense.
someone want that? Why would they want that?
Because they don't really feel comfortable with either sex organ, so they feel
Uh,
like it's just better to just get rid of it.
I feel like that's a mental health problem.
I
And
mean,
I think when we get I think when you start playing with science, you kind of get like you get like all these different like explosions of things. And I just feel like we're having an explosion. And
yeah.
I think that induces the problems and the trauma that happens in the community. I think you're a wonderful young woman, and I think you have great potential to be an amazing young woman. And I think that you are on the right path. And I think that you did state that you identify as female, and that's wonderful. But trans female lesbian, and I think that is magnificent to have that expression. But for me, it will be very hard for me to be in a bathroom and be like, oh, I'm sorry, that's just a gender A person, you know?
Yeah.
I find that strange. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. Um,
Hmm.
Now there is a rapper person, I think Saucy Santana. That person, they have hair and they have like the shape of a woman, but then they have a full beard. And I would feel weird if they came in the women's restroom. What do you ladies think?
Um, I think due to like my trauma, I might be a little on edge, but ultimately speaking, if I like knew that person, I don't think I personally would
I think
care
there's
just
someone in the capital region, like um, I don't know. They were trans, then they well,
for
now
those
they're
who
not.
want the props of being a woman without all that dumb
yeah.
commitment of breasts and female clothes and making a commitment kind of thing, for the non-committal transsexual that wants to just be like little bits and pieces that are fun and all the rest, never mind for all that. It's all fun and games, right?
Is
Yeah.
that
This sounds
fair
like
to
a
the
topic
women
of fun
before
and
us?
games.
Is that
This
fair
is
to
turning into fun and games.
is
I
that
don't think it's
fair?
funny.
Is that fair to the women before us who fought for our rights to vote? Is it fair to the women before us who had to stay home while the men were in war? I don't think so. I think that it's A to Z, and I can't support anything else but that. So I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I just feel that when you start getting crazy with the identities, that's when all those traumas happen and those problems happen. And then it goes right back
And
to
then you
mental
want to
health.
wonder why everyone's confused. It's confusing. You don't even know like what you would want to be, just like little bits and pieces of this and that for funsies.
Mhm.
Like I can imagine telling my baby, like, "Mommy, who said, oh no, that's just transgender, gender A, gender queer, hun." Like, I mean, how, like, where are we going?
Yeah.
Um,
Honestly, like, if I had a child, with my girlfriend and there was somebody who is agender, I think, like, if they say, like, "Hey, mommy, why does that woman have facial hair?" I personally would probably turn to the child and say, "Well, some women have a condition that involves them having facial hair. Like, for example, me, your mother. I'm as you know, I'm trans, and unfortunately, I transitioned later, and so therefore my facial hair developed. I keep it shaven, but some women aren't too concerned with that. And um, basically, I think, like, when it comes to
sorry.
either
I
transgender
didn't mean
women,
to laugh. I'm so
no,
sorry.
you're fine. When it comes to transgender women or cisgender women, like, because cisgender women can have facial hair too. I've seen
Yeah.
cis girls with full beards and mustache. So, like, if they did not shave, like, that whole thing would grow in. And I don't think, like, excluding them from the bathroom just because of their facial hair would be fair to them.
Well, we're not talking about women. We're talking more or less about men.
Oh, no. I know. I'm just saying, like, on the issue of like that, because one of the things that is going on is, the bathroom debates. Like, how a lot of people are saying that transgender women should not go into the bathrooms because, for the same reason that they're shoving
Well,
us
it is
into.
kind of crazy because I don't think a bunch of trans women like for pretended to be trans and did all that stuff to themselves just to be able to use a woman's restroom. Let's
It,
keep that real.
it's kind
absurd.
exactly. It's like
Keep
this meme.
perverts out
Yeah,
of the
I'm
bathroom.
paying $10,000 to get my face reshaped. I'm paying $20,000 for a sex reassignment surgery. I used
Just to
the
be
wrong
able to
word.
go in the ladies' room. It's because it's
And
so
I'm spending all this money just so I can go into the bathroom. I'm spending all this money just so I can pretend. Like,
yeah, I think it's very unlikely someone would go through all those changes just to have the privilege of walking into a ladies' room.
like,
It doesn't make sense.
Let's bring it back.
I don't know a person. I don't know a woman who's doing that, who is transitioning. I don't know anybody like that.
And when people say it's a choice, who would choose to go through all the pain and suffering that we go through to become a woman just because, just like no reason at all? Let's be serious about it.
Thank you. Like, who the fuck is gonna transition just because it's fun?
I mean,
Like, that
that's
is
a
the
hard
most
life. That's a hard
that is
road
the
to
most
walk. No one's doing it
insulting
just
thing
to use a ladies'
anybody has ever said to me is, "Oh, you're just transitioning because you're choosing to. It's a choice." It's like,
yeah.
I did not
You would
choose
pick
to
that of a
be.
choice, though, of all the pain and suffering.
Yeah, like, oh, I want to have fun with this rape that just happened to me. Oh, I want to have fun walking down the street being called a faggot. Oh, I want to have fun being profiled as a
But at the
sex worker
same
by
time, we
police.
got to present ourselves a good way, baby, because when we add to all these negative like things, it's like pouring salt on a bunch of chips and saying, why are these so salty? I thought it was sugar. Like,
That's true.
I being over sexualized and contributing to the energy of sex work because it makes soul ties. Let's just be real about that. When you're making a bunch of soul ties to a bunch of people and just being defiled and being just treated like throw a couple bucks at it and walk away, how does that leave you feeling emotionally when that guy's at home with his family? Like, it feels like it's making bad luck and then crying about it later.
Well, basically, like I said, desperate times do call for desperate measures. So a lot of
It's
times
true.
due to workplace discrimination, transgender women,
Very true.
you end up not being able to find work.
But as
which
I
is
was saying
why we
before, there was a gender person who had
Yeah.
them, they, their pronouns. And
Mhm.
they worked at a store that I worked at, and I guess you call it the back of the kitchen. And they worked
Yeah.
at the front of the kitchen. And you know, they had a full beard and women's garments on, and they had a job. And I remember I asked that person, I said, you know, would you ever want to be on hormones? You know, I have extra hormones. I can just give them some. That person said, no, I'm, you know, not sure about that. And, you
Yeah.
know, they went by they, them, theirs, and they had a full, you know, beard. And I always said to myself, you know, if that person can work, then so many other people could get out there. And I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it, you know. So I don't know how true it is to say that being trans prevents you from getting work. I think some people like
Well,
to do that kind of work, and that's okay. If you like to
I'm
do
not
that kind of,
saying being trans is what's preventing people from getting work if you're trans. A lot of times what's actually going on is workplace discrimination by employers who just don't just, they want to have their cake and eat it too.
that's true.
And due to this workplace discrimination, a lot of transgender people would probably either quit their job or they might end up getting fired. And so therefore finding a job, especially in COVID, especially in this declining economy, is already hard enough as a cis
But there's a
person.
bigger picture though. There's a bigger picture to it though, because think of what you're serving up to the whole world energetically of sex. I'm a sex object. I became a woman, not for the commitment of being a woman, but I wanted to be able to stick men for money and get money out of guys. They would give money to me because I look sexy. And then later, when everyone thinks of nothing but a sex object that you own created and then feel bad about it later, I feel like it's
Well, let
kind
me
of like
just say this.
it's a double entendre. It's a double entendre.
There used to be a society that I was involved in. And at that time it was called adult entertainment, and we didn't call it sex work. And we definitely didn't want the government involved, and we didn't want all these rights. Oh, you gotta make it legal. It was a society, kind of like a secret society, and you had to know someone to get into this society. And I'm writing a whole book about it. But you know, within this society, I was introduced to being a call girl, and I got paid very large sums of money. And we'll get back to that in just one moment because the segment is running out. And we'll chat about that. But what I'll tell you is when I got introduced to this society, there was a lot of money exchange. And, you know, I knew that when I did it, I was only doing it for a short period of time to make ends meet, to help with some of my procedures so I could blend it in. So my journey was a little bit different. I did it kind of like you, young lady, to try to make, you know, surgery things happen. And I achieved that. I'm not sure how it will play into making it legal, because when you do that, that's when you got to start paying taxes and doing all that other good stuff. But you know,
Make up Sam, yo pimp. Here, I did some sex work. So, I mean, as long as the government gets a cut, I'll be good.
see,
But
back then we didn't publicize being adult entertainers. That was like our work. It was very societal. So we
on the plus side though, if we do legalize it and we tax it, we can then have like safer facilities to be able to perform these jobs without risk of, like, you know, boundaries. Like, for example, like if they pay for one thing and then they try to get you to do something else, well, you know, just because you paid doesn't mean, you know, you're entitled, you know what I mean? So it's like you push the agreement, well, then you can face some legal repercussions. as opposed to, oh, a sex worker gets raped, she can't go to the cops or she's gonna get arrested for being a sex worker.